Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football late Monday night. Mike Norvell, the Florida State Seminoles, come out and I think, for lack of better terms, lay another egg. And I think the Florida State fans on Twitter and on the message boards have absolutely nailed it. This is a team that has tried to build the line of scrimmage through the transfer portal, and they've got lucky in years past with guys like Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. They didn't get lucky in 2024. And I don't know what Nick Saban or Pete Thamel or the Florida State insiders were seeing during fall camp, because everything we heard out of fall camp, Josh Farmer, Daryl Jackson, they're NFL caliber guys. They're going to be one of the best defensive lines that we see in the country. That is nowhere close to what we've seen on the football field the first two games of the 2024 season for Florida State. In fact, it's kind of the stark opposite. I mean, Daryl Jackson, Joshua Farmer, they're getting boxed on the line of scrimmage back-to-back games. This is a Florida State team that just is not good enough along the lines of scrimmage. And I think the Florida State fans nailed it. You have to recruit these guys from the high school ranks. You look at Georgia, or you look at Michigan, or you look at Alabama, they don't get their line of scrimmage players through the transfer portal. They get them out of the high school ranks, they get them in the program for a couple of years, and they develop them. You look at Mike Norvell and Florida State, what they've done from a personnel standpoint, building this Florida State roster, they've relied significantly in the transfer portal. You go back and look at some of the best defensive linemen that Florida State has been able to sign on the high school trail. They're probably the best one that comes to mind right now is probably KJ Sampson, who's going into year two, and I think we've seen him play maybe 10 snaps all season. And so I think the frustration that Florida State fans have is, hey, if you want to be a top 10, top 5 team competing for national championships, we all know how important the line of scrimmage is. And Florida State just doesn't seem to be doing it right. And we've commended Mike Norvell for how well he's used the transfer portal in the past. He's done a phenomenal job of it. But I think that transfer portal reliance specifically along the lines of scrimmage has kind of caught up to him, because this is a Florida State team that is getting a kind of back-to-back weeks. It just kind of dominated along the lines of scrimmage. You can win at a very high level if you have line of scrimmage play like that. Now, we're going to talk about DJU. Certainly did not play a very good football game. I think people getting on Twitter to clown DJU and get their clicks. The biggest problem with this Florida State team is along the lines of scrimmage, because it is certainly just not good enough. You ran 3 plays on offense in the first quarter. You don't have depth on the defensive line. You're just not good enough at the top end either. This is a team that misses Braden Fisk and Fabian Lovett. That's, probably my first gripe that I have. And now going to the next thing I want to talk about in a very similar conversation, not recruiting the linebacker position good enough. You look at this modern era of college football where teams are going to try to get their playmakers in space on the perimeter. You need linebackers that can cover a lot of ground. Yes, DJ Lundy would be a probably all-American linebacker 20 years ago in terms of just being a box linebacker, taking on blocks and operating by the line of scrimmage. But when you ask him to operate in space, he's just not fast enough. And you're seeing Georgia Tech and Boston College go after these linebackers in space. I think that also has to do with the lack of recruiting. I mean, you look at guys like Raylan Wilson, who were from Tallahassee, Florida. Raylan Wilson looks like he's going to be an All-American his junior year at Georgia. Florida State's got to land those kind of guys. The linebackers that they have coming in, that was by far our biggest question mark coming into the season. It has not been nearly good enough at the linebacker spot. And when you start coupling a defensive line that is just getting pushed around with linebackers that are not consistently fitting the run and playing downhill, that's how you give up 263 rushing yards to Boston College and kind of just get blown off the football field. And so I think my first part of my frustration is just, and look, I've been a Mike Norvell guy, and I still am a Mike Norvell guy. But I think this has to be a wake-up call in terms of Mike Norvell, how he goes about recruiting and building this roster. I'm not saying don't use the transfer portal, but I am saying don't be relying on the transfer portal to build the lines of scrimmage. Now, you look on the other side of the football, the offensive line, this again, you read everything from the Florida State insiders and what you're hearing out of fall camp. This is going to be a veteran offensive line that's really big and really physical, and this Florida State team is going to run the football. 21 rushing yards against Boston College. Pass protection has been a disaster. We gave some credit to Alex Atkins in terms of the improvements that we've seen on the offensive line, but even go back to 2023, the Florida State fans who have been rocking with the boys for the last 2 years, that team was elite in 2023. And Jordan Travis and Keon Coleman and Trey Benson and Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell. We always said that there was one aspect of this Florida State team that wasn't elite. That was the offensive line. And I think the most frustrating aspect is a lot of us were getting up here and saying, hey, this Florida State offensive line has gotten a little bit better every single year. Can they take another step in 2024? They certainly haven't taken that step. I think there's a good argument to be made that this Florida State offensive line has gotten worse since 2023. I mean, not only in the run game, but pass protection as well. And then you have a quarterback in DJU who just is nowhere near consistent. And we knew DJU lacked some consistency. I think we were all hoping, or the Florida State fans were kind of hoping that would DJU be able to take that step under Mike Norvell, right? He got a little bit better at Oregon State with Jonathan Smith. Can he take another step under Mike Norvell going into his 5th year of college football? Certainly hasn't taken that step. DJU, you can't win with a quarterback that can't consistently make the throws. And then you look at the pass catchers, it's a disaster. And again, another frustrating aspect of the last couple months is what have we read coming out of fall camp? Like the Florida State insiders and the scouts and what's been talked about within the program is how big and how fast these wide receivers are. It was a lot of potential, not a ton of proven production, but a lot of potential. Can they put it on the football field? These pass catchers can't create separation. A guy like Malik Benson, we expected to be that wide receiver one. I mean, he kind of blanketed a couple of different times. I think another frustrating aspect is all we heard about is how big and fast these guys are. Malik Benson, a 10-4 in the 100-meter dash. Jaylen Brown, 10-6. How many times have we seen Florida State go vertically down the field, not including trick plays? We're not even asking these Florida State wide receivers to use their best assets, and that is their big, long speed working vertically down the field. I look at this Florida State team, and it seems like just everything that we heard during fall camp was just not true. This was a Florida State team that we thought would dominate the line of scrimmage, would have a downfield passing attack that could hit some explosive plays. Jalen Lucas was going to be an X factor in this Florida State offense. They're barely giving him touches. It's kind of frustrating. And where does this Florida State program go from here? I think that was the title of this episode. You got to lean into the young bucks at this point. You look at DJU, he's not going to be on this team next year. Why would you stick with DJU? He came here, he got some money. He's going to go to the NFL or maybe go do whatever he's going to do after his time at Florida State. You have to look at Brock Glenn and say, hey, we're going to lean with you and Luke Kromanoke and say, hey, we're going to develop you guys and get y'all right heading into 2025. The young bucks along the lines of scrimmage, you got to start pouring in and giving them some reps and getting them developed. Again, you want to sell to these guys in the high school recruiting trail to come to Florida State. You got to start playing the young cats, especially along the lines of scrimmage. And you've seen Mike Norvell kind of adjust it. In 2025, there is a clear emphasis along the lines of scrimmage. And so I'm happy to see Mike Norvell making those changes. I think that's going to pay off. But I think in 2024, to kind of sum up what we've seen, is just they got bit. They've relied too much on the transfer portal. They haven't done their job on the high school recruiting trail, and it is showing on the football field in 2024 for Florida State. You look at week 3 against Memphis. Memphis is a very good team. I'd like to see the young cats play. I don't even give a dang if Florida State loses that football game. I'd like to see Brock Glenn get some reps. I'd like to see a guy like Elijah Moore get some work. Feed Cam Davis the rock. Let him get some experience. Lean on this young nucleus that you have, this young, talented nucleus, and let them try to get some momentum heading into the back half of this 2024 season. Again, we're 2 games in. This team can get better. This team can lean on some of the young cats within this roster. That's what I would like to see. I don't want to see them trot out the same players that one of the last things, and we'll kind of close on this, and I'm not used to saying this about Mike Norvell coach teams. Boston College and Georgia Tech just not only outplayed them from a football standpoint, they outworked Florida State, both Georgia Tech and Boston College. You talk about what team wanted it more tonight and last Saturday in Ireland. It wasn't Florida State. I think that's another concerning aspect too, and arguably another reason to say, hey, are we going to continue to rely on the transfer portal, quote unquote mercenaries, to come into this program? I don't know. I think Mike Norvell has to ask some of those questions. You got to dig deep and say, hey, how does this Florida State team move on going into week 3? I'm interested to see what Mike Norvell says post-game and kind of throughout the week in terms of what he's saying to the media. We'll talk about this Florida State team. We'll close it there. You guys can tell I'm a little bit frustrated. This was a team that I was really excited for heading into 2024, and it's not been the team that we've been reading was the fall camp team, and that's frustrating. we'll close it out there. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all want to let it fly in the comment section, go for it. And we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.